So good evening and good morning. Thank you so much for joining in. I know that it is most of us it's a vacation time. Still, you took your time out to join us. So today we have one of the eminent person. Every alternate week we have very eminent people talking to us in the field of health and well-being. Today we have one of the very eminent person, Dr. Balasubramania. And Swamiji could not join online with us, and so as Subrato and Anirban, they're all traveling on a very important assignment. They're all traveling, so they could not join. So I'll give a brief introduction, and then followed by Swamiji has given a recording of 3 minutes about Dr. Balasubramania, an introduction about him. Followed by that, Dr. Subramania will talk about 45 minutes around. And you can put all your questions in the chat box, and we will be getting all of them addressed at the end, one by one. So here is the introduction about Dr. Balasubramania. It's a big introduction, but I'll just handpick a few important things I'm talking so that it will give you an idea about with whom we are talking with. Dr. Balasubramania, born in 1967 in a lower middle class family. He got all his education done in Mysore, graduated in Mysore Medical College, and then did his master's in Christian Medical College, Vellore, on anesthesia. And the very important thing is, as a medical student at the age of 17 years, he got inspired by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, joined a group, a mediocre friend, who founded Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, a registered voluntary social service organization started in 1984. Today, Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement is recognized as one of the finest non-government organizations in India. So we are very proud to have Dr. Balasubramania with us. And his introduction still goes long. He is an advisor on community process and comprehensive primary health care in National Health System Research Center, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. And his passion work in remote places is immense. And he has developed a lot more systems and processes in remote places. It includes integrative health, awareness and handling of HIV and AIDS related in the remote places, emergency medicine, very importantly, palliative care and comprehensive management of chronic illnesses. All the work, predominantly he did it in remote places. He has been a member of various planning and policy committee at national level as well as state level and academic bodies of various universities in Karnataka as well as in India. He played a pivotal role in drafting, launching of Karnataka State Palliative Care Policy Vision 2025 for education sector of Karnataka State, and the world's first university recognized comprehensive emergency care and life support training program under Jeev Raksha. He has been a recipient of various awards, includes a prestigious Paul Harris Award from Rotary International, and more importantly, he got nominated by the citizens of Saraguru town in Mysore district, where he did a lot of work. By those village people have nominated him, the city people have nominated him for the citizen of Saraguru town, which is very, very so heartwarming. And personally, Dr. is married with Dr. Badmaja, and he's blessed with 2 sons. So with this, I will have a brief talk from our Swami Dayadipananda, and then we will hand over to Dr. Subramania to talk.
Namaskar. A warm welcome to all our esteemed participants who are there with us today to listen to one of the wonderful speaker, Dr. Balasubramania, about whose qualification we just learned from Dr. Subratoji. I know Dr. Balasubramania personally because with all the scientific evidence-based knowledge that he has gained out of his own experience, he has a passion to serve the community. inspired by the life and teachings of Swami Vivekananda, serving the living God in man. He is one of the active member of Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement in Karnataka. After working at various capacities, Dr. Balasubramania has developed unique concepts how the household remedies can be very powerful tier of healthcare, which we call fourth tier of healthcare: primary, secondary, tertiary, then comes the fourth tier of healthcare. Based on his own experience, who went and lived with people, especially the tribal people in Mysore district, H.D. Kote, and applied all his scientific evidence-based method along with the home remedies that people we have learned over the ages. So, a man with knowledge and experience whom we call as a man of wisdom. So, I know Dr. Balasubramania as a man of wisdom. We are very eager to listen to Dr. Balasubramania the words of wisdom, how the home remedies can be a powerful tool for the health care. So, not taking much time, let us listen to this message from Dr. Balasubramania and get benefited by understanding and practicing in our own life. Also, after practicing, we should spread them in the community. With this brief note, now I welcome Dr. Balasubramania for today's talk. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. So, Dr. Balasubramania, you can share your screen and you can start your talk.
Thank you, Naresh. Is it clear?
Yes.
So, good evening, everybody. At the outset, I would like to do my humble pranams at the holy feet of the Holy Trio, Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and Mata Sharda Mata. And today happens to be the birth anniversary of Mata Sharda Devi. My pranams to Swami Dayadipananda and the Christmas greetings and the vacation greetings to all of you who have joined online in spite of being a vacation. I thank you all for giving me an opportunity to be amidst you today. Going forward, I would like to talk about this concept of fourth tier of healthcare. This fourth tier of healthcare is not something that is being conceived now, but it is only in terms of elements articulated to a certain extent. At the outset, I would like to say that this is yet to get recognized formally in any part of the world. However, there is momentum gathering, at least within this nation, even at the highest policy-making bodies, that this is worth the reckoning. So what is actually this one? I realized that there was people who are away from the, not from the healthcare sector, and hence I thought it was important for all of us to understand what exactly is the tiers of healthcare. Well, this triangle depicts what we normally see as healthcare in India. This healthcare in India, if you look at, if I position that entire thing as a triangle, the bottom 2/3 portion is what is termed as the primary healthcare. The primary healthcare hitherto in this country was limited to reproductive and child healthcare. So predominantly, previously it was called mother and child care. So whether the lowest level of the facilities, which is the closest to the community, was only limited to that. However, with the launch of the Ayushman Bharat scheme, this got further strengthened. And if you could see, the unmet need of non-communicable diseases and other chronic diseases got included at the primary healthcare level, which was actually necessitated by the fact that the entire country of India has gone through an epidemiological transition, which means that a country which predominantly had issues related to reproductive and child health and communicable diseases now have greatest morbidity and mortality due to non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, etc. So in that context, this was a large unmet need, which is actually depicted by the yellow portion, the white portion of the, I would say, lower trapezium. Now, with the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center, this has expanded, and this expansion means the lower portion of the primary health care, which is provided by the sub-health center and the primary health centers in the country, which together account for nearly, at this point of time, nearly about 1.85 lakh healthcare centers in this country, have now got repositioned and transformed to provide all services from home to tomb, both for illness and wellness, focusing on preventive, promotive, curative, rehabilitative, and palliative, which accounts to about 12 packages of services, right from mental health to trauma care, to child care or pregnancy care, to elderly and palliative care. Everything is covered. And this comprehensive primary health care would now support not only every facility closer to home, but act as a gatekeeper for moving the patients to the next level of care called secondary care. Secondary care, primary care, if I want to say, it is a first point of care. It looks at all issues of medical concerns that each one of us have as a first point of contact, and almost 70% of the problems could be solved at that level. Those patients who cannot be fulfilled at that level move to a secondary care facility, which is basically a specialist service, technically meaning the primary care looks at the human being, the secondary looks at the disease or the organ system alone and forgets the human being, which you have experienced in many secondary care hospitals when you meet I would say a physician, a general surgeon, an obstetrician, a pediatrician. So they become segmented, look at only a specific population, a segment of the population, and at the same time specific organ system or disease. Further, it becomes super specialized when they refer them to only dialysis and nephrology care, or only cardiac care where you undergo a stent or a cardiac pulmonary bypass surgery or a neurosurgery. So that becomes super specialized care, and that is what is the top pink portion is showing. So this is the normal process in which healthcare is getting delivered. With Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center, this lower portion has got further strengthened, then acting as a gatekeeper. So secondary and tertiary are not loaded unnecessarily, because many times even for a simple illness, people run to medical colleges, which are the tertiary care institutions, or the specialist centers, which are the secondary care hospital, which could be a community health center or a district hospital. Ayushman Bharat supports the top portion with only 40% of the poor people getting up to 5 lakh coverage of insurance, whereas the bottom primary healthcare portion is 100% free and it is closer to home. So what does primary healthcare actually mean? The primary healthcare basically, by definition, means a whole of society approach. When I mean whole of society approach, it has to look at the highest possible level of health and well-being in an equitable way as early as possible, focusing on health promotion and disease prevention and feasible to people's everyday environment. But these are all provided by a provider who is an external person, who fulfills 8 C's of the primary care, acts as the first point of contact. In the current context, we try to make it comprehensive, It ensures continuity by timely referring the patient to the higher level. It is expected to provide convergent and coordinated care, coordinated between the members of the team, convergent in terms of the sectors where, whether it's nutrition, whether it's water and sanitation, everything has to be looked upon when you're talking about illness. As far as possible, it should be client-centered, and even today, it is cost-free and community. Now, how does this primary healthcare deliver? As I told you, there is a primary healthcare center at the center, which covers on an average 30,000 population in an Indian context. In a tribal and hilly area, it covers about 20,000. Traditionally, there are about 5 sub-health centers, which means for every 5,000 population, 1 sub-health center is there. They all are subsidiaries of a primary health center with lower level of capacity, both in terms of human resources as well as in terms of services. But they are mentored and monitored by the medical officer at the PHC level. Hitherto, the sub-health center had only an auxiliary nurse midwife and a multi-purpose worker. But today, 5 ASHAs who support this community, 2 multi-purpose workers, and a new post called community health officer or a mid-level healthcare provider who's a PSC nurse or a BMS graduate has come into that sub-center. So the PHC medical officer, who has a team of about 12 to 15, is further strengthened by about 8 people in each of these sub-health centers, and that too with a leadership position for a community health officer who is better qualified today. This is what the primary healthcare system is all about. So what gets delivered? This means the patient has to first come to that level. So first level community health officer, as I told you, leading a team of 2 multi-purpose workers and 5 ASHAs. They are supposed to be the first level of care. You can see the photograph on the right side, which is the Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center, because each of the PHC and the sub-health center are now called Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center. Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center at the sub-health center level, Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Center at the primary health center level, and this is similar in the urban areas too. They support wellness activities. They do screening of patients for non-communicable diseases. It could be BP testing, it could be diabetes testing, it could be cancer screening, etc. They support community outreach in terms of celebration of some important annual health calendar days. They have basic tests at the sub-health center level, which accounts for about 14 tests. At the primary health center level, about 63 tests. Now, teleconsultation is being pushed in with 62% of the centers already having it. And slowly telehealth is also picking up so that the sub-center is able to communicate to the PHC medical officer through a telehealth network, and the PHC medical officer higher up to the district hospital and even the medical college, they can connect on a telehealth, which basically means primary health care can now be delivered more holistically. Even some elements of secondary care, which does not require a patient to be physically examined by the specialist doctor, can be communicated and managed through the telehealth network at the primary healthcare level. That means it is more closer to home. And the sub-health center also refers patients to PHC in case it is required. They provide a list of about 105 drugs and they do the record keeping. Now, when it comes to primary health center, which is the hub that I saw, that I showed, in the primary health center, the medical officer is in charge. The diagnosis confirmation normally happens at the doctor level. The community health officer does the assessment, but doesn't end up with a diagnosis. They do a test at the point of care, some of the point of care tests, but the final decision will be made by the medical officer. So teleconsultation provides an enormous support for this sort of communication. And of course, the PHC act as a good gatekeeper for people to go to the secondary care centers. And teleconsultation with specialists is also possible at the primary health center. The community CHC is a community health center, SDH is a subdivisional or sub-district level hospital, and then DISC-DH is the district hospital, and for the medical college. These provide secondary care level services, which I told you is specialist services, where advanced diagnostics can be sent, management of, I would say, hospitalization, complication assessment, tertiary care linkage, all those things happen at that level. The PHC is able to provide 63 tests and 172 different types of drugs. Now let me go to the situation now. Well, this is a beautifully designed architecture of the healthcare delivery system. But let us look at how human behavior works and what is working or not working and what is the trust levels within the system. The situation is none comes to the sub-health center, which is just 2 kilometers away from home, or the primary health center, which could be 4 kilometers or 5 kilometers from home, without trying something at home. This has been a tradition. In fact, WHO, the World Health Organization, estimates that nearly 70 to 80% of the Indian population rely on some traditional medicine and practitioners for primary healthcare level. Well, the government has created that beautiful architecture, and private are supplementing some of those, are creating, I would say, complementary or sometimes competitive similar structures. However, people still rely something on their own. So there is hardly any person who comes out of the Indian household without trying something and then reaches out to the doctor. And even when they reach the doctor, they continue to practice something. And 70 to 80% of the Indian household is estimated to be having it. Many practices that we have resolved to, and COVID was a good example also, when many of us practice many things. Many practices have stood the test of time, but many over a period of time have crept in as rituals and sometimes as superstitions. So we actually do not know how many of them are good, how many of them are bad, but the fact of the matter remains that everything is running. So definitely the rural households are predominant in that, but the urban households are not completely, I would say, immune to practicing this. So the practices have an impact on health and healthcare in terms of physical, emotional, mental, and social elements of healthcare. Apart from, it also has an impact on the financing and the sustainability of healthcare and the health itself. But why are we bothered about it? Because though all of us tend to practice many of these things, we tend to hide it. The reason why we hide it is because the qualified practitioners who comes out of our education system normally tend to admonish us. So normally they would not promote it. And this has created over a period of time an element of mutual mistrust. So the mutual mistrust has affected the system or the overall healthcare scenario in many ways. One, there is an issue of behavioral change. So even if there are some things which you want the community to change their behavior, to embrace better health, you have challenges. So the behavioral change modification is not easy in this scenario or where there is a lot of mutual mistrust. Second, there are good practices in the household levels which are completely getting lost out because preservation of these good practices is essential for science. It is essential for human race. Third, because of this, there is a lot of very poor research and documentation of these issues, and hence we can't even validate or not validate any of these elements. Finally, sustaining health and healthcare cost is also an element. So what happened subsequently? Over a period of time, this mistrust, even though rural it is predominant, urban is not immune to it, many of the households practices are slowly dwindling. And what could not be solved at home, they used to come to the community level and now to the primary healthcare level. But now that system itself is getting weaker and weaker. So institutional help is sought only when they were not able to solve that. But this is slowly disappearing. The Indian National Health Policy, as early as 2002, and more emphatically reiterated in the National Health Policy 2017, recommended integration of traditional medicine into the system. But yes, there is again a lot of mutual mistrust. So incorporation of a traditional medicine into a mainstream healthcare delivery is not going to be easy because both have a lot of mistrust, and most of mistrust is basically because lack of mutual understanding. And lack of mutual understanding is because lack of mutual respect. And this has to be somewhere, I would say, this vicious cycle has to be broken. This is where we need to look at. Well, I can outrightly say that there is not a single household which doesn't provide healthcare, and all the kitchens in Indian households are invariably pharmacies of the house. So it could be promotion of self-care practices, it could be promotion of food and water hygiene practices, it could be whatever we cook as prevention and therapeutic decoctions or measures that happens at home, or it could be traditional practices of routine care, whether it's infant care, maternal care, elderly care, or palliative care. We have our own methods at home level. These practices are somehow getting lost out on one side. At the same time, some things are also getting corrupted on the other side. So how do we cook this one? There has been some attempts over a period of time to actually capture some things more with their own personal experiences rather than real knowledge in that context. But however, there has been some element of traditional food halls, especially in antenatal care, whether it's in, I work for the tribal areas, we could see for diarrhea patients, if they're moderate diarrhea, they used to give that avalakki or beaten rice with bananas. Then they, for severe diarrhea, they used to actually take the pomegranate peels and then boil it and then give that water to this one. And they were quite comfortable. In fact, they spell out a lot more remedies, even up to the level of contraceptive. They have herbs which they use. Now, where is the important knowledge getting lost out? So traditional antenatal care, you have seen probably many things has been now documented. I've seen that some of these issues which are getting documented are being verified, but it is not publicized. It is not becoming a mainstream issue. Though there are some research studies which you can pick it up from various journals or even in the web. So there are this one, for example, I spoke about antenatal care till now. Now we talk about neonatal care, including a simple issue of giving bathing child with, after a massage with coconut oil. There are a lot of studies which have come out with good statistics over there, which says that improved anthropometric parameters could be achieved. Topical coconut oil application gives reduction in transepidermal water loss, which actually means their hydrations are better maintained, or even because of the simple massage, physical rubbing, there is a vagal activity and gastric motility, which enables child to have better meals and get a weight gain. So is ginger, garlic. I don't want to keep talking about haldi, which even Germans wanted to patent it. So there are many things that have actually come. And very, I would say recently, just about a couple of years back, there was a lot of talk about hand hygiene, etc., and water itself. And we were ourselves involved with Transdisciplinary University in one of the studies, which was actually the use of copper vessels. In fact, it's a very traditional system that, copper vessels were used for storing water. And for storing water, over a period of time, we started having plastic or molded or other molded items, which could be used, which was more decorative when it came to utilization. But the traditional practices had not only just about decoration, but it also talked about, actually ensured better health. It also ensured sustainability in terms of cost. So if we look at this one, in fact, there were studies which were scientifically validated. When copper was in a copper vessel, when water was stored for a maximum period of 12 hours, that is, evening you fill up water and the next day morning you actually drink that water, even after inoculating a deadly virus, right from Shigella to Vibrio cholerae to hepatitis A to typhoid, bacillus, salmonella typhi, the water, once it was actually stored in copper vessels, by 12 hours, all these things were I would say completely disinfected. So in that context, it was beautiful that we could see that a simple procedure of simple storage of water could actually have a lot of this value. Additionally, there were another advantage. Whereas even if you wash your hands with the best of the soaps, if I touch something, then again I have to go and wash because it again becomes contaminated. But because of the leaching of the copper inside that, it was seen that even recontamination with the Salmonella typhi was not possible because the copper ions still existed within that water. So these studies are published in international journals, and hence then subsequently to match up to the modernity, the tradition was blended. So copper, which was actually a transgenerational or intergenerational asset, could not be afforded in real time this time. So it was actually created into a hollow cylinder which would last not less than 15 years. And that was put in a Milton like cool cake that you can see on the photograph. And hence the water was also available, and then it was appearing also very nice, and it cost you only about 1,800 to 2,000 rupees, and it lasts about 15 years. And its maintenance is very simple. All that you have to do is wasted nimbu or lemon. And means in the sense that after you use the lemon juice, whatever is left out as a peel, or with the used tamarind, you can just wash it once in 48 hours and the vessel is ready for reuse. So with the same efficiency. So in that context, and apart from that, the copper's micronutrient values also added a lot of benefit for their immunity and anemic status. Of course, recent studies that have also been talking about even meditation having an emotional well-being, and there are even the mantra meditation having a lot of these values. Well, these are all good things, but how do we actually move forward? Is this possible to actually preserve it? So how do we look at what is to be relevant, what is not relevant? So we, along with Transdisciplinary University, with the state government support, actually with the satellite imaging, this one, Karnataka State Remote Sensing Satellite Application Center, tried a pilot project in HT Kote Taluk, which is actually in Karnataka in Mysore district, to develop a local medicinal plant herbal pharmacopoeia and an ICT platform for advancement of healthcare at local levels using traditional knowledge in sync with modern database and analysis. Because traditionally, we don't want to see traditional in all the ladles that we use. We want everything on computers and Android telephone, mobile phones today. So this was an innovative demonstrable pilot project, which actually looked at how to understand whether this is possible at all, whether people are willing to co-opt with there. This is where I would say the future of the 4-tier concept actually evolved. An innovative demonstrable pilot to promote use of ecosystem specific plants in order to build a self-reliance in rural communities. So for primary healthcare, so this is Karnataka and this is Mysore district, and within Mysore district, this is the taluk that we have chosen for it. So what we did do, we actually looked at through a survey of primary healthcare conditions. We did household level survey of about 650 households, and then existing knowledge and practices, we actually documented whatever they were doing. There were 2 levels of documentation, one with respect to whether they are aware of it, second, are they practicing it? The third level was with respect to the expenditure that they were incurring. In the current search, in this one, it was basically targeted on the youth and the next generation leaders, how many of them know about it and how many of them have practicing it. So the gender mix in the 650 households where it was surveyed was also reasonably good, with 50.95% of males and 49.05% of females. And amongst the study population, we deliberately chose all the tribal populations and the marginalized population. This actually showed that 34% were illiterate, 25% had primary level education, and only 0.73% had moved up to post-graduation level. And most of them were in farming or in daily wage labor. So this is the community that we thought that would be immune to every of the onslaught from the external technology platforms or the higher level of education causing its own barriers. We thought they would be practicing better. But what was we brought to good? So this is the 30 villages we went at. This is the mapping where all it was done. And we went through a very mixed method. We had both qualitative study as well as quantitative study. So qualitative research and quantitative. So a mixed method was this one. And it was randomly selected in 650 households in these 30 villages. So what did we see? What we saw was the 30 common diseases also we mapped out of that in the 10 top health conditions that they were worried about. And this is the way a primary healthcare looks at. They don't talk about typhoid, they talk about joint pain, they talk about stomach ache, they talk about backache, they talk about fever, etc. Now for that one, so we looked at what was the traditional healthcare practices, knowledge, and this one. So the knowledge level was looked at both treatment as well as prevention. So before any problem arises, what knowledge do they have with respect to preventing diseases, and what knowledge do they have with respect to treatment? Similarly, we looked at was the practice level. We were, while traditionally the WHO documents that 80% of the Indian households believe and practices traditional medicine, we were given a surprise when they said that only 29% of them knew about it, whether it's in treatment, and only 15% knew any preventive measures. 5% said no and in treatment column, and 25% said no in the prevention column of the treatment issues. But 66%, so 60% and above did not know at all. They don't know. They don't know what is there at all. Practice, it was even worse. 28% was practicing. So you could see 29% knew about treatment, but only 28% are practicing. So there is a 1% loss even in practice. Whereas prevention methods, they agreed that whatever they know, they are practicing. Rest of them don't know and they don't practice. So people who don't know, or they don't, are they very sure that they know, they have no knowledge, then also they actually practice. So when we looked at the overall, this entire program was ran for about 2 years. And after 2 years, what did we see? So what we did during the 2 years was that we actually looked at 30 health conditions. And out of the 30 health conditions, we started documenting practices. So for 14 conditions, we had minimum 4 remedies at the household level, which were scientifically validated. So the procedure in this entire, one was level of documentation. Second was validation. Third thing is replanting it back into the households in terms of awareness, to tell them saying that what you were doing, X thing is good, you please continue. Y thing is not good, either you wean off, or Y thing, if you want to do this modification, has to be done. This is what this university concept actually helped us to understand. So there was one understanding of the situation in terms of healthcare. The second component was education of the community with respect to the correct practices for the 30 health conditions. So for out of 30 common health conditions, you could see 4 remedies for every 14 conditions, 3 remedies for 8 conditions, 2 remedies for 5 conditions, and 1 remedy for 3 conditions were actually documented. So this was the value that it brought in. So in this context, when we looked at the understanding of what exactly happened, we found that with respect to after this entire process of education, we realized that the knowledge component, which was baseline about 29%, moved up to 57%. This is with respect to knowledge for treatment of already existing diseases. To prevention, 15% to 53% was the movement we had. When it came to practice, 28% were practicing before, end line became 48%. And similarly, in terms of prevention measures, what was being practiced at 16% moved to 43%. So how did we achieve this? This was achieved by giving them this level of IEC tools, documenting their own processes, validating in the science, and giving it back to them. And this we gave it back to them in terms of brochures, in terms of small videos, in terms of this one, and then also in terms of books, which were used to train the providers to say that these are good things. And these books were further taken up to the school teachers for the 8th and 9th and 10th standard students in the local taluk level to actually propagate that. Further, we did one more thing. During this period, we said that these are the plants that are using for these sort of remedies. Are there enough of them in the neighborhood? For that, there was a satellite mapping done. And after the satellite mapping done, they were also educated about conservation of those medicinal plants. So what was the results that we found after that? In the conservation of medicinal plants, in 2 years, from 9%, it moved to 62% when they started growing more and more of those plants. Further, they started using those plants. What was seen as always was only 0.3. This started moving to 44.35 from 18.92 before. And further, those people who never used it was 75 has started using it further now. So in that context, the conservation component also moved forward. The propagation component also moved forward. When we came out to the actual understanding of the disease remedies, you could see from this, the graph, that the number of households reported that the common health problems were reduced in the end-line survey when compared to the baseline survey. When these practices became more homebound, we could realize that there is a lot of effect that happens at the community. So the disease morbidity patterns started reducing. Their ability to go up from home remedies started moving significantly. You can see it is almost a threefold jump from 9% to it moved to 30% in terms of the home remedy usage. The net, what we are trying to understand from this process is there is a lot of good elements within that which could be validated and then propagated back, which actually can be using a system clearly of the existing government functionaries, the school systems. So in which case, three things are being achieved. One, a better healthcare or more convenient healthcare. The second thing is conservation of the important vegetation. Third is better education in the schools so that the students learn what is relevant to their life, and also it preserves and propagates it. So all three components were addressed. Then we started converting things into videos and audios, and then started propagating that using app, community radio, as well as exhibitions in fairs where the local hearts are being set up. This has now come on to a public access portal where the HT Koti Taluk level pharmacopoeia is available, and this gives us further understanding of how it can be used more openly to all places. So in which case, what was available at the home front, when there was an element of respect and trust, we could recognize the important elements, nurture it, and further substantiate this in terms of impact into their life, impact in their health, impact in terms of the cost, and overall preservation of good traditions. So considering all these things, it makes a case that till now home has never been recognized. So we talked about the three tiers as primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care. So now if you want to look at the fourth tier, which is a pre-primary care or a primordial health care, which the community is already accepting, if we as a society, we as a government, we as a policy, we are able to start recognizing home as a healthcare institution, the family as the healthcare provider, there is an element of recognition, respect, leading on to more transparency, more accountability, better scientific validation, better research and documentation, and finally, better utilization of the wealth of knowledge and practices that are prevalent in an Indian household for nurturing better health. So this is what is the context in which the fourth tier of healthcare could be looked at. So it becomes an institutionalized care, it becomes affordable, it will be self-sustaining healthcare tier with least cost from the public exchequer, because every household will be able to do it at its own level. And this would also mean the family atmosphere will have a much more strengthening in the whole process, is a logic and a deliberation, an argument that could be put forth. So how do we actually ensure this fourth tier healthcare? We need to get into each elements, whether it's diet and nutrition, whether it's management of acute illness, management of chronic illness, and their own ability to partner with neighborhood, because a lot of these practices are not only in household, they also communicate to their neighbor. They also take support of their neighbor to deliver that. If these things could be done with a partnership with academic and research organization, there could be beautiful element of research and documentation further leading on to scientific validation. And that scientific validate knowledge, when it is put back, there is a better opportunity of people's acceptance of their practices to be modified. Hence, we will be able to not only conserve better practices and propagate, but also retain healthy home practices, scientifically validated home health practices within the, I would say, society, which could actually be a forerunner for a better health. Further, it will also help preservation and generational propagation of the local health traditions. It will reduce the cost of primary health care. It will also be in synchrony with the emerging internationally recognized futuristic concept of One Health, where we are talking about vegetation or animal or human. They all together have this one, because all these elements are taken forward into it. And further, it makes us strengthen our overall primary health care for reaching out the sustainable development goal with a huge potential for realizing the dream of universal health coverage in India. So with this basic understanding and the context in which it has evolved, I'm of the opinion that this could be considered. It requires a greater amount of debate. It requires your inputs. We need to really look at how to make it more robust. And I would look forward from this August audience, critical analysis of what is being done. We may not have answers for everything right now, but we have an opportunity to collaboratively explore answers and then ensure that these sort of traditions, which are scientifically validated, which are well enmeshed within the traditions of the community, are propagated perpetually for better health of the country, so that we would be able to build a new India which is healthy and fit. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would be more than happy to look at the questions and your arguments, which would also help me reflect upon and help all of us to collaboratively work for recognizing this house as an important element of healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balasubramania. It's really tremendous work. What you have been doing it is. You may unshare the PPT so that I have few questions which came to me.
Yeah.
And then people will start ask some questions going forward. Yeah. So few questions which came to me. How different this activity, what was executed in HT Kote is different or from the typical Ayurveda and the Siddha medicine forms. They also use a lot of plants and all these herbs, right? Is it a different, this form of medicine, is it different or is it a combination of all? How is it different?
See, if I look at Ayurveda as a science, Ayurveda as a science has emanated from the households is not a far-fetched thought. However, when we are looking at Ayurveda as a science, as a clinician, as an Ayurvedic physician, you have much more to offer than this segment that is already being provided for. So if the household level we are able to propagate it, these levels, you as a physician, you need not bother, because people would have taken it at their own cost, at their own convenience. And when we talked about validation also, a lot of these practices were actually compared with the classics and looked at whether it is actually documented or not.
So there is one person asked, there is a book you have, showed it based on the study, and it was in Kannada. Do we have those books in English?
Yeah, actually, because it was for the audience directly to the school, that was translated in Thai. We do have it in English. It is available with Transdisciplinary University.
So one more person appreciated the effort, and it will be great if the similar activity get into the government level, central government level, and get more importance for it, because he feels that there is a lot of these kind of medicines. When he was young and the person was mentioning, grandmother used to give a lot of these medicine. They never go to hospital just like that. I mean, they go once in a while, very rarely, because all are taken care, which are all dying. That's another person is commenting and appreciating you. So another question is a little tricky. Why are these practices are dying? Is it our ignorance, or is it modern medicine kills it?
It is a combination of the two, is my opinion.
Okay.
Because if I look at the history of medicine in this country, as early as even at the beginning of the 20th century, it is documented that there were 6 Vaidyas for every 1 modern medicine practitioner. But however, the British actually brought in a law which clearly said that every Vaidya has to be subservient to a British medical officer. And this actually was a modus of the colonial world. And unfortunately, as we moved forward, the mainstream, even if I were to look at, I'm an allopath, I'm an anesthetist by qualification. When I entered medicine at 17 years of age, I had no opinion about anything. I only knew that I have to go and treat patients. And it was an element of doing service to the communities. All are ambitious, or I would say a noble vision that all of us tend to have at that point of time. But once we go into it, we come back anti-Ayurveda on all respects. We don't know why. Okay. So it is not that we go with any opinion, but we come out with this sort of idea. In fact, I was very joking. In fact, when I studied in Mysore Medical College, one of the oldest Ayurveda medical colleges is in Mysore, which is just opposite to my college. And those students used to come to our own canteen to have food. And we used to chide them, saying that they have brought some greens and they're going to now grind here, etc. This one. So, and it was it was basically a matter of ridicule and fun for us. But once I entered into a tribal habitat, there were many instances which actually threw me out to understand, saying that what is that we are doing and how come these tribals are able to. In fact, one specific incident I would like to share, which I'm very, very touched when this happened way back in the late 90s. When I was actually driving an ambulance to go to a distant tribal area, on the way in one of the crossing a tribal colony, which was just adjacent to the road, one old man of 70 plus years came and stopped the vehicle. And I was very agitated, saying that what is this? This fellow was a bronchial asthma patient and he used to have a derifilin injection in those days. And I said, what is this? You didn't come to the hospital, you want to stop me on the road? Okay. Then he said, no, not for me. My wife is bitten by a dog. So I said, fine, we'll go there. She's like equally aged, approximately 75 years old. They were living in a very, very dingy hut and she was not able to, and the dog bite was around the knee. And what she had then, it was such a dark room that I could not even see without a torch what she was doing. She used to get up, just cook and then sleep. So the cooking was just adjacent to the sleeping mat for her. Because for 3 days, I said, when did it happen? 3 days back. And then I was very agitated. A dog bite is such a serious issue and you should have been treated in the golden hour and you should have come there, and we are worried about it, and such a wound and it gets contaminated. And it is so contaminated that we as doctors don't even want to suture it first because we will be locking the infection. So, but immediately I took her into the ambulance, aborted my journey elsewhere and brought her back to the hospital. And I saw a good green patch on the whole thing. The whole wound was covered. It is almost like plaster. The wound was plastered with a green. It took me 40 minutes to wipe off that using 1 bottle of hydrogen peroxide. After actually cleaning off the wound, not the wound, but the cement of the green paste that she had brought her, I was in for a surprise. A dog bite normally is so infected and contaminated that we start off with antibiotics immediately. Apart from anti-rabies vaccine, we don't suture it, it is way. And that too in an old woman of 75 whom we always considered to be immunocompromised, coming from a tribal heritage, undernourished, contributing to immune compromise further, and living in a very unhygienic condition. All cumulatively, we said it was a great this one. And when I opened, I was stunned to see beautiful red granulation tissue on it, not an iota of slough or pus in the entire thing. I was embarrassed with myself. What did I do? With the best of the antibiotics, I had to clean the wound every 48 hours at least. Okay, with so much of slough coming out, and trying to wait for 7 to 10 days to actually see a granulation tissue for a semblance of healing coming up. But here again, in this woman, in this status, with after 72 hours, this beautiful healing has already initiated, and with absolutely, it is such a beautiful clean wound. I said, why the hell did I clean it? Okay. So these sort of experiences put me on an understanding, saying that there's something in it which I don't know, which my college never taught me. Okay. So this combination of the two, my ignorance, the way I am educated, at the same time, because of the so-called the blue white collar, this one which actually admonishes everything that in another person. So today I can tell you, as every day we become more and more educated, we should also appreciate community also is getting educated and empowered on a daily basis, and we need to listen to them. They have their own wisdom and we have our own wisdom, and we need to have exchange of those wisdoms to actually come out with something more holistic and useful to the society. So both of us are ignorant in some domains, and we need to actually admonish those ignorances rather than admonishing each other's wisdom.
Absolutely.
So this is something that came out strongly for me.
Yes, sir. It's well said. Well said. And we really appreciate the example what you gave. That gives us a good perspective of it. A few more questions quickly. This portal you showed, is that available in English? Yes, I saw that it is in English only. I saw that while you're talking. Yes, sir. It is available in English. I'll put that one pager in our WhatsApp group. I mean, you can read the portal. It gives in Google itself. If you go HT Kote,
herbal, TDO also you can get it.
It comes HT Kote, herbal pharma. You put it in Google, it comes directly.
And one more important thing is actually this entire project was supported by Karnataka Knowledge Commission.
Wow!
As an experiment.
Okay. Okay.
And Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan was the chairperson who supported this cause.
Great, great. And then another question, please share the name of that book, the one which was in Kannada. He's asking, can you please share the name of that book so that we can utilize?
Yeah, actually, I'll be sharing the slides. So the slide has got this one. It has got the English title as well as the Kannada book.
Oh, the slide what you shared with me has got both.
Yeah, it is. You could, in fact, I showed that on the slides.
Yes. No, if that's the case, I will put it in the WhatsApp group together.
Yeah.
It is only in English, Kannada, doctor, not in English.
No, but I've mentioned the three titles.
Okay. And then is another comment. It's like adopting naturopathy type of food habits and curing the ailments. Like a person commenting, it is like living with the nature and adopting with the naturopathy type of food and habits. That's a comment from one of our participants.
See, my limited understanding is that naturopathy is actually a part of the peel out of allopathy. It's one more way of looking at the things, and they have very little interventions and look at more and more natural phenomena to heal. So, but Ayurveda, when you look at, there are interventions also. That means there are therapeutic measures which naturopathy would not actually advocate directly.
Right.
So in that, there will be a difference. And in the context of traditional practices, we have seen both. For example, if it is naturopathy, it should have been an untouched wound. But in that lady, they have actually taken some greens from somewhere, ground it, mixed it with some oil, and then pasted it.
Right.
Yeah.
Can homeopathy also included? There is a doctor is asking this question. I don't know for what. I mean, we are not getting the question clearly, Dr. Deepa. If you want to ask this question, you can unmute and talk as well.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Yeah, nice session. Yeah, very nice session. I really enjoyed it. when we are talking for four tier, I mean to say like if can we include homeo medicines also, like we are having medicines, simple medicines. So like home
What I
remedies.
want to clarify at this point of time is we are not going into any pathis within the system. We are not even, I am not even justifying it as Ayurveda or naturopathy or homeopathy or allopathy. Okay. We are only looking at what are the traditional practices. It might fit into some of the pathis there. I'm not there. But
Right.
when we are trying to look at, we are trying to look at that as a tier. For example, even primary health care, there are homeopathy clinics which are primary health care. There are Ayurveda clinics which are primary health care. Similarly, secondary care, there is Ayurveda secondary care institutions. So we need to appreciate the fact that here, when you're talking about fourth tier, we're only respecting and recognizing home, whatever is being practiced. It might get validated through any of the pathis in the mainstream science.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we are also running out of time, Doctor. Also, the questions are done. So we wish that your work on this field needs to get a lot of strength and energy and spread across India so that we get back the old medicine stream. I remember I lived with my grandmother almost 20 years. She never visited a hospital. Every issue, I lived from a village, every issue she had a medicine for herself. So I can't imagine that life now. So we wish that we go back to that life, go back to that knowledge with the evidences. So we wish you all the very best, and we request you to continue your service for the humanity, Doctor. Thank you so much, and pleasure having you in this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naresh, and I request the august audience to actually look at within their own domains also these elements, so that it becomes a universal phenomenon. Ultimately, government recognizes it itself as an important care, where then the whole institution of health in the country will start looking at every house and respecting it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, audience, and have a great day and have a good night. And also, Happy New Year. We'll meet again in one of the next IWSP talk. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Happy New Year.
Thank you, sir.